Good morning. Welcome to Zen Glump, the podcast. Music, poetry, and psychogeography. Check out the website, zenglump.net. Sign up for the newsletter. Check out the YouTube channel. If you are listening to this on your podcast application on your telephone, you could also be watching it on YouTube. I've started putting a video version. And if you are watching this on YouTube, make sure to subscribe. Very good, thank you. So today, the prompt that I had written for this morning is the joy of fiction. The joy of fiction. So let's see what I might have meant when I wrote that to myself. Past Andrew said, "Hey, Podcast Andrew, think about the joy of fiction." So I've started writing fiction. There are a few of you who've read my stuff, and it's not nonfiction, but it's in the essay format. I say it's not nonfiction because it certainly isn't fact, right? It's memoir and a smattering of philosophy, a bit of music and poetry and psychogeography. Very much lines up with the content of this podcast. A collection of essays that I refer to every once in a while. So that's kind of my background, my context, right? I think of myself as an essayist, someone who takes a topic and pokes around at that topic, perhaps is propelled in almost like a billiard ball striking another billiard ball. When I hit the original topic, I bounce off into another billiard ball, another topic. And so these essays are very interested in the pathways between different ideas. I enjoy that sensation as a reader, and I really enjoy it as a writer. I'm actually quite enjoying that metaphor as well. If I'm a cue ball that gets struck at the target billiard ball, that initial ball may end up in the pocket. It may be a bank shot. My strike with the cue stick may be inaccurate, and so the billiard ball, the cue ball veers off and hits something different. There may be an intended pattern of bounces, but most likely there's an unintended reaction from my cue shot. And the cue shot is the act of sitting down with a piece of paper, pencil, or pen. And the motion of the billiard balls as they scurry around the table is the written output. So that all sounds pretty fictional, right? There's no way you would read one of my essays and come away thinking that you understood anything about natural science or politics or anything that could be confirmed. So why fiction? What do I mean when I say fiction? Well, it's pulling together a few projects. First, I've started writing stories. When I describe them to myself, I call them stories. How do I distinguish on my schedule when I block off time to write? I need to be able to distinguish between composition and essays and stories, because I think about it differently. With the stories, my process so far has been, I have a notepad. I'm actually going to hold it up here so that those of you on YouTube can see it. It's a Rhodia dot pad. And it is their 10.5 by 14.8 dot pad. a stack of them that I use to write this kind of writing. And I am, for the most part, using a pencil. Not because I need to erase anything, but just because that is the particular sensation that I'm enjoying for this type of writing. So I will write for some period each morning, each scheduled morning. I don't write every morning. And I write, when I do write, I've talked about this before, but I'll take a moment here. I write in very small increments as often as possible. So if I were to write for more than 20 minutes at a time, that's a surprise. And part of that is just the nature of work and calendars, and the constraints of time. But part of it also, I think, is just recognition that that's how I like to work. I find it very difficult to focus for longer periods of time. I might do 2 20-minute sections. And in a fantasy world, on a weekend afternoon when I might have nothing else to do, I'll sit and do like 4 or 5 20-minute sections and kind of get caught up. But it looks like for fiction, so I sit here and I write, and I'm practicing description, and I'm practicing observation of imagined scenarios and imagined dialogue. And I think the reason that I'm enjoying it so much is that I really don't know what's going to happen next. I don't know that when I start an essay either, but I kind of have a message at the beginning of it when I start an essay. Perhaps in the same way that I have a theme when I start a podcast, or a prompt at least. But with these stories, I read a book about writing by Stephen King, and it's a fantastic book on storytelling. And he describes the story as like this set of dinosaur bones, a skeleton that we uncover a piece of, and then we realize that it's part of an immense skeleton, fossil. I'm looking for the word fossil, but I'm saying skeleton instead. And we don't know what. We just know that it is there. And the work required to excavate that skeleton has to be meticulous. You can't just go in there with a bulldozer, because if you do, the remaining structure, or the structure yet to be uncovered by the buried skeleton, will be destroyed. He also talks about the necessity of writing through, getting it down, and then going back and fixing and cleaning up. And I think that's an interesting process and premise, and certainly one that I follow, although I've read and heard other writers talk about the exact opposite. You sit down and you work on what you're working on until it's good, and then you move on. I think, but for me, part of that is a different consideration of how stories work, but also back to that sort of my natural condition, which is a little bit lazy, right? The idea of writing something and keeping at it until it's perfect. I'd love to think that I was that kind of a clear-headed, disciplined writer, but I'm not. At least not yet. And my storytelling persona, or my storytelling aspect, is new. It's new for this part of my life. I'm trying to think back when I was a child. Was I a storyteller? I think when I was like a teenager, I would have said I was a poet. And then I stopped writing for a couple decades, and I'm old enough now that I can say things like that and still have a few years of writing under me. So the joy of writing stories is almost like a flow experience, like the joy of uncovering this skeleton and kind of giving up some of the responsibility for now. Like my goal, my job is really to listen. And I do want there to be characters. Now the characters are going to be a little bit flat in the sense that they are, my intent is that they are initially archetypal type of images. Like I very much like stock theatrical characters, like commedia dell'arte characters. And I want my narrative characters in these stories to have an element of that to them. Again, because I do love like the star-crossed lovers and the manipulative old man and the fool. These elements from commedia, I really do have an abiding love for those characters, and those characters don't change. They react to their scenario. So I enjoy that. I also just, again, how much of this is my preference and how much of it is my natural proclivity. I'm too lazy to do character development. I can't imagine spending the time thinking about how an imaginary character is going to think about something. But we'll find out. It's immensely pleasurable. And the other thing that the fiction allows me to do is to bring in other projects that I'm a bit hesitant to write as standalone. For example, there are a couple of long-ish poetic forms that I want to write, but I don't quite have the confidence to say that I'm working on that project. But I do have the confidence to say that a character in my science fiction novel is writing a poem, and here's the poem. So that's interesting, isn't it? That's a trick maybe I'm playing on myself. And then finally, this all kind of ties together, right? I'm trying to write the libretto for an opera, and there are characters in that opera who I realized are related to the characters in the novel. And that realization, like when that clicked, it felt like a switch. It felt like a pleasure switch going on. Like, oh yeah, this is all the same project, just different facets of it, and different approaches to the same questions. So my goal, I think, I really do think this will be a modestly sized trilogy of magically realistic science fiction, maybe, would be the genre that I would pick. And I'm working on first draft. Maybe I have a first draft of the first book by the end of the summer. That'd be a fantastic goal, wouldn't it? That's very ambitious. For me, I am neither professional nor hardworking. So let me know if you'd like to know more about the stories within the story or about the process of writing. Drop me a note, zenglop@gmail.com. Keep your wits about you for the day, and I will be back later in the week. Cheers.